Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Ian Olgerson. I'm a research director with Kagan Research, and we're one of the research units underneath S&P Global Market Intelligence. There's about a half a dozen of us, but our purview is covering the TMT, or technology, media, and telecom space. And the way we do that is we track pay TV and broadband in more than 80 countries. We provide detailed wireless metrics in more than 40 countries, including subscribers, towers, and spectrum in most of those countries. We track traditional networks, more than 600 traditional networks in the US, Europe, and Asia, as well as chronicling the OTT disruption that is happening in the video space. Our research also covers the broadcast space, film, as well as doing media technology coverage. So thank you very much for joining us today. Mo's discussion is meant to sort of set the table for the rest of your event by providing some foundational information on the way that the market is going, and then we have a nice Q&A with Jonathan and our partners from Zenith. And so with that, I'll just hand it off to Mo. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for making it today. I'm going to kick off straight away because we're probably going to be short for time by the time we're all done. Looking at the state of the multi-channel TV market, including broadband, there's been a big impact from the internet, and I'm going to be talking quite a lot about the internet and OTT and connected devices. Looking at this chart, you can see 16 countries in Western Europe, and it's the penetration rate of multi-channel TV or pay TV over TV households. And you can see the red arrows are the ones that actually represent markets with growth going forward to 2023, and the bigger the arrow, the bigger the market. So really, there's only France, Germany, and Spain that represent the big markets in terms of growth, and even then, that growth is actually quite small. So essentially, the market is stagnating, and when we're looking at revenue growth on pay TV, a lot of it is being driven in Europe by price increases. The internet itself, in a sense, has changed the dynamic for free-to-air. So where there's room for penetration to actually grow on pay TV, you'll find that the availability of free-to-air TV channels mixed with the hybrid element of bringing OTT into that system essentially is making it harder to drive penetration up. And just to explain quickly, because it might be a bit confusing for some, markets like Sweden, Switzerland, where you're seeing multi-channel penetration at over 100%, that's because some homes are taking dual subscriptions. So they might have cable traditionally, into their homes, and they opt for the IPTV package from one of the operators. Moving on, looking at the state of online video, very quickly, there's a couple of slides here that I'm going to show you. What you can see in that Venn diagram on the left-hand side is the multi-channel operators since 2016, roughly, a little bit before for some of them, but the real push was from 2016, integrating OTT subscription services on their platforms. So that Venn diagram, you can see the operators who actually have their own OTT or virtual kind of pay TV packages, the ones that are investing in original channels and content, and the ones that actually carry third-party SVOD. So you can see here that essentially there's very few operators that don't actually support an OTT. And by OTT, I'm assuming everyone knows what that means. It's online subscription video services, and essentially you can see that, you know, there's a handful here that still don't support Netflix, for instance. Pretty much every single operator I looked at has Netflix on their pay TV system. And the integration isn't just about access to Netflix. You know, we're looking at marketing, promotional stuff, segmentation, EPG, a dedicated EPG channel for some pay TV systems. And notably here, actually, Sky has done one of the deepest integrations we've seen with Netflix in terms of bringing that content into their home screen, into their search, combining it with their own premium content. So beyond that, on the right-hand side, you're looking at the share of the market, and I've only picked out 2 or 3 players here. I mean, Netflix is everywhere. Amazon is pretty dominant as well. And the only other player that has presence in more than, you know, 2, 3 markets is Sky. And they've recently launched in Switzerland and in Spain. And that's on top of the markets that it already has, so Austria, Germany, Italy, UK, and Ireland. And you can see that essentially Netflix takes a huge share of that market. And I'm going to show you some more subscriber data in just a second. Before I talk through this slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of perspective in terms of, you know, what OTT is doing in this space. And it's you know, beyond the integration, we're seeing some operators in the Nordics, for instance, selling OTT services such as Netflix and HBO alongside their basic TV package. So you get the basic package, and at the same time you have access included within that to an OTT service. So again, that integration for operators like UC in Denmark is going much deeper. In terms of the chart on the left here, just comparing the growth rates. So the Kagan is the compound annual growth rate for online video in the red, broadband and pay TV. And you can see the growth rates really here. I'm sorry that the online video is actually a little bit mixed up, but the top one is the broadband households. The bottom blue one, the light blue line, is the online video subscriptions. And you can see that the difference is huge. I mean, it's 7.7% for online video and less than 2% for broadband and pay TV. So the growth prospects there are quite tiny. And ultimately, this is where bundles make a huge difference for pay TV operators. If you're going to look at the impact of bundles for pay TV operators and broadband operators, we had an anecdote from Proximus in Belgium, who's the incumbent telco, and they reported churn rates of, let's see, something like 28% roughly, 20 to 28% of a churn rate of 20 to 28% on single play products. Now on triple play, that was down to around 10%, and on quad play, you saw the churn rates, which is essentially the retention rate, dropping down to about 2%. So it has a huge impact on being able to retain customers. The chart on the right, I'm showing here the online video subscriptions in millions for the 12 markets in Europe that have more than 1 million subscribers. Germany and the UK take up a huge proportion of online video subscriptions in Europe. And just to kind of put that into context in terms of the growth of video, there's just a little anecdote here from Cisco's Visual Networking Index. And it's really about the growth of internet video, and it's going to be huge. I mean, we're looking at, 80% of consumer internet traffic being represented by video by 2021. And if you're not sure what a petabyte is, it's 1 petabyte, I think, is 1,000 terabytes. So, you know, it's a massive number to kind of try and consume, but it's there. Beyond bundles, so packaging of broadband TV, fixed and mobile telephony, there's some new trends emerging around connected devices, smart devices at that. And these essentially are quite varied at the moment. You know, we're looking at the battle for aggregation of content, and the players like Google, like Apple, are coming into the market quite aggressively, again, through connected devices. What I'm showing on the left-hand side is Sky's soundbar, essentially, that integrates quite deeply into the pay TV system. Essentially, it's an amplifier, it integrates 6 woofers, it has several speakers, dynamic volume adjustment, in real time. It has an enhancement mode. It can lower the bass for when it's trying to enhance the low volume speech, depending on the type of content that you're trying to watch. And it retails at $799, so it's a huge price, but for customers, it comes down to about £300, which is quite a significant discount. But again, these things are essentially tools for, excuse me. So these are essentially tools to try and drive retention, to enhance the appeal of the pay TV offer. And if you think about modern TV screens, they're very thin and they're not very good at supporting speakers. So you know, high quality or next generation sound is a key factor here. You look at the sound box again from NetGem, just below the Sky one. That essentially is a telco offering from a vendor. So here they've done kind of something relatively similar, but a much lower price point. And then Android TV in the middle and the Apple 4K TV box just below it. We're seeing operators actually deploy these boxes as default boxes for their pay TV systems. I mean, there are a lot of advantages in terms of saving time on development, time to market, but the risk is that it kind of you know, offers the giant tech companies like Google, like Apple, the opportunity to kind of, you know, enter that market and be a real presence. And if, you know, this thing's falling off. And be a real presence in the market. And essentially, you know, that's a risk, especially if channels, you know, become apps. And we see everything proliferate on these devices. Beyond Android TV and Apple TV, you know, you're looking at the smart speakers. That's a real growth market. I mean, someone recently said that that's, you know, the fastest growing segment that they've seen in tech since the smartphone. It's a pretty big statement, but it kind of gives you an idea of how important these devices are. And they're being integrated as well into pay TV systems. I mean, if you look at Viaplay, which is an OTT service offered by what was MTG previously and is now the Nordic Entertainment Group across the Nordics, they now allow customers to search, control content on Viaplay through the Google Home or the Google Mini Box. And that allows you anything, you know, from PVR features to search to control, and it's available in 3 local languages, so in Danish, Norwegian, and in Swedish as well. And that's the first time that a smart speaker's actually supported those languages. So voice control is a major trend going forward. And here, just below that, you can see, just a snapshot of who the main players are in the smart speaker segment. And here we're just looking at shipments, so this isn't an installed base, but it gives you an idea of who the key players are. Carrying on with that theme, on the next slide, streaming media players are also kind of making a major introduction into the market. The chart on the left shows the installed base of streaming media players in Western Europe. And really from just under 10 million in 2017 to about 13.5 million in 2018. And by 2020, we expect that to fall just shy of 25 million. So you can see that what that represents as a percentage of households. I've put that in the red boxes, in the red text there, just to give you an idea of the penetration of broadband households. Obviously, homes can have more than one streaming media player device, but here I've assumed that every home will have only one, just for illustrating purposes. And looking at the key protagonists here as well on the right-hand side in the streaming media market, Chromecast is clearly the biggest, Amazon, Roku, they're really the main players that you see in the market. And we're not really just looking at aggregation here. There's a lot more going on. It's not about aggregating video services solely. It's and also providing stable access to these services. If you look at Roku, for instance, it's no longer just a TV hardware company. I mean, their advertising business is now huge. It's their biggest and fastest growing part of the business. And in 2018, their platform revenue, which actually includes advertising revenue, surpassed the hardware side of sales revenue for the first time. And it's more than doubled in 2018. And most of that ad revenue is actually coming from video ads that are sold on the market on ad-supported channels for some 22 million active subscribers. So these are publishers actually selling most of the ads on its platform and paying essentially to promote their channels on the home screen, for instance. It does sell some advertising through kind of smaller, for maybe the smaller publishers, for unsold inventory, for the bigger players. But it's now actually pushing for its own inventory to a large extent. And it's also recently launched a Roku Audience Marketplace as well. It's a kind of a program for publishers to sell ads in Roku channels. And that can be targeted using Roku's first-party data and ad tech as well. And the other side of the device ecosystem is smart TVs. The key thing here is that the retail market has shifted to 4K TVs now, and the more recent smart 4K models are seeing much higher connectivity rates to the internet than we've seen in the previous generation of smart TVs. The opportunity here for advertisers is kind of similar to what we've talked about with the streaming media players to an extent. Their key issues involve the operating system fragmentation, which we don't see on the streaming media player side as much. And we are seeing kind of trends of licensing Roku operating system or the Android or the Amazon operating system for TVs, especially in the US. The interesting features that are emerging here for smart TVs, I'd say from an advertising perspective, are mainly around personalization and targeted advertising. You've seen a number of services. I mean, a lot of it is still being trialed. A lot of it has been found to be disruptive and intrusive to a large extent to the viewing experience, and that's the problem they're having there mainly. But content discovery is a huge part of that ecosystem in terms of what happens in the future with smart TVs. But also another thing to think about is whether the Internet of Things, you know, that smart TVs become the Internet of Things portal. And we haven't really seen anything around that yet, but it's certainly a possibility. Moving on, just a couple more slides left. We're good for time. From a US international perspective, Discovery and Viacom, both very much subscription businesses in the last 10 years. And they remain so, but they've moved on into the ad side of things increasingly. I mean, Discovery especially with pay TV sports. Viacom has gone heavy on free-to-air, acquiring Channel 5 in the UK or using the Paramount brand essentially. So now advertising is bigger for them internationally. I will share these slides later, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the last couple of slides. And here you can see the percentage of our overall revenue for RTL, ProSieben, ITV, Mediaset, TF1. Essentially all the legacy broadcasters are still very much advertising businesses. But the revenue dependency is moving increasingly and coming down as ad revs slow. Plus we're seeing an increased kind of drive on revenue from other sources, especially distribution, studios and e-commerce, for instance, in the case of ProSieben. And the last slide, really here just looking at ITV as a case study. It's been very interesting because of the amount of studios or production companies that they've bought into to grow the business, and that impacts everything else in the entire business that they do. You know, content creation globally, they can hit more subgenres, they can enter other global markets in different languages, and this has helped them actually be more targeted with their schedule, and that helps advertising revenues through better rates as well. Content is still at the core of all of these businesses, and I think what's really interesting is what's happening on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, but even more so on Twitter because of their strategy of establishing partnerships with brands, with TV companies and other institutions. And those tools are helping more than just drive engagement. They're actually helping to monetize some of that content in different ways. I'm gonna finish it up there because of time. Thank you very much. I will be providing these slides, as I said earlier. Just to introduce the next part of this session, we've got John Berger, who's our analyst for TV and advertising, doing a Q&A with John Bernard from Zenith Media. If you guys want to come up to the stage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Berger. I'm a research analyst at S&P Global Market Intelligence here in London. So in the final part of this session, we'll turn our focus to advertising, particularly on the demand side. So that includes spending patterns or trends that we've seen in the last 12 months or so across various media platforms. So in the time we have remaining, we'll really be looking at advertiser demand across TV and digital primarily, but also digital's penetration of other media platforms as well as other related topics. So joining me this morning is Jonathan Bernard, who is the Head of Forecasting and Director of Global Intelligence at the media agency Zenith Media UK, which is also part of the Publicis Group, one of the world's largest advertising agency groups. So, Jonathan, thanks for joining us bright and early this morning. Firstly, just give us a brief summary of your role at Zenith.
Sure, good morning. So as you say, I'm the head of forecasting at Zenith, and my role really is to make use of all of the expertise and intelligence that exists around the network of Zenith agencies around the world, but also other agencies from the Publicis Group, and to use that to find out what's going on in the world of advertising and media consumption, and tell stories about where it's going, and then take all the credit for it.
Okay. So I guess you could say you're at a rather lofty vantage point of seeing just where advertiser demand is met.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in, actually, because I don't have any direct contact with advertisers myself. As you say, I sit back from that a bit, have more of an objective view of what's going on. But I do have day-to-day contact with people who are working with advertisers to solve real problems in the market, which real problems of transforming their business and in the light of what's happening with technology. So I'm exposed to a lot of real change and real problems.
Okay. Well, so let's kick off by looking at TV or broadcast media, really, and its actual value to advertisers. Because it's often said that TV advertising, in the face of rapid online growth, it actually retains its value because of its importance to brand building, mass market advertisers. How strong do you think this argument is, especially with the current trends of personalised advertising?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I'd like to start off with some definitions here. When I talk about television, I'm normally talking about traditional television, so broadcast scheduled television. And then there's online video, which is basically everything else. Now, that's a definition which we have to take on because that's how it's researched typically by monitoring agencies around the world. It's not necessarily the most useful of distinctions, because online video can encompass so many different types of viewing. So many of which Mo has just been telling us about. So we've got OTT, we have on-demand viewing to pay TV boxes, we've got viewing long-form content on websites, we've got YouTube viewing on whatever device that might take part on, in-stream video ads on social networks, so Facebook videos. Encompasses a huge range of different types of viewing and types of experience for advertisers. Talking specifically about traditional television, obviously there's a huge demand, a huge challenge here for the traditional broadcasters because, generally speaking, people are spending less time watching traditional television and more time watching online video. And that movement is continuing. But there is huge demand from advertisers for traditional television advertising for several reasons. First is that it's unparalleled as a channel for brand building. And brand building is an essential part of all marketers' activities. I think there is some awareness that recently the advertisers have shifted maybe a bit too much towards performance targeting, towards sales, towards judging advertising's success on its ability to shift products in the short term, which is, I think, a mistake, because a brand lives and dies by its long-term appeal. An ad that appears on television today may not sell today, it may not sell tomorrow, it may not sell this year, it might sell 5 years down the line. It's also very important that non-buyers are aware of brands, especially for luxury brands. There's no point being a luxury brand unless people who don't own it are jealous of it. So television is excellent at brand building, but it's also excellent at reaching non-buyers. We've conducted research to see what happens to awareness of advertising among non-buyers of brands across all media. And it's a lot lower. Non-buyers of brands will not pay nearly as much attention to an ad than the buyers do. But the medium where the drop-off is the lowest is television. So television performs very many vital functions, and it has very strong demand, but supply is falling. So what we're seeing is quite rapid inflation of pricing. And what's happening to overall revenues is determined by how fast prices are rising and whether that's quick enough to compensate for the decline in audiences. Yeah. In many markets, it is. In some, it's not quite. So we're seeing declines in revenue at the moment. But the fact that the supply is falling quite steadily and revenues are holding up, so it's growing slightly in some markets and declining only slightly in others, tells us just how strong demand from advertisers remain. Okay,
just going back to your point about the value that TV delivers for brand building advertisers, you'd find, I guess, that most of these mass market advertisers tend to be the bigger brands. So, I mean, you're saying that TV still actually delivers for these big brands?
Absolutely, and if you strip out the really big advertisers from the market as a whole, TV is still probably about half the entire global advertising market. Yeah. It's more like a third with all advertisers put in. And yes, I mean, the way you get to be a big brand is through several years of brand building and TV being a vital part of it. I mean, I shouldn't generalize too much. What works for some brands won't necessarily work for all. Yeah. So some brands can be very successful with very limited television exposure. Yeah. But I think it's very telling that when Facebook wanted to address some of the concerns over privacy earlier on this year, when Google decided to launch a TV service in the US, when Amazon wanted to get awareness for its smart speakers, they went to TV predominantly.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because in my time, I spent most of my career working in TV ad sales, and I saw a sudden huge increase in what you might call digital native, direct-to-consumer brands looking to TV for brand building. However, they found it difficult to measure or the attribution. So, you know, they want to know exactly who they've reached. They still wanted to know, they still wanted the accuracy that digital provided them. So, in your experience, what are the other ways, apart from brand building, that advertisers are looking to drive growth in TV?
Sure. Well, I mean, attribution is a very important point, and it's crucial in the online world. And advertisers' growing familiarity with online advertising has really created expectations in them for traditional media, which traditional media have traditionally struggled with. And yes, it is difficult to attribute particular actions to particular views of ads. It's not impossible. So, for example, some broadcasters can, I think particularly of Sky here, but others exist, have household level data on exposure to advertising. Yeah. And I've seen examples where they partnered up with retailers to correlate that to their own household level data on purchases. So it can be done. There are other ways of using large volumes of data and increasingly machine learning techniques to determine the attribution of each particular channel across the consumer journey in reaching the end of final purchase. That's becoming more useful these days. So it is becoming easier to determine exactly what role television plays in driving the final sale. It's not nearly as easy as it is online, and it won't be for quite some time. Yeah. But certainly that's happening, and it's true that more brands are paying much more attention to looking at the response rate from all of their touch points.
Right. Okay, so let's just move on slightly and talk about TV's advertising's correlation, if you like, with the user experience. TV's increasingly looking to increase the compatibility between its advertising and the user experience. For example, by looking at ways to reduce the ad load or by implementing more targeted advertising. But the possible downside to reducing ad load, for example, is that this may lead to cost inflation. So how, in your view, are advertisers responding to that kind of delicate balance? You know, they want their ads to be seen, but at what cost?
Yeah, this is interesting. This is like the yield management in print, for example. There is a balance to be found, and it really varies according to exactly what the environment is, what channel you're talking about, what the audiences expect. I think a lot of the discussion about reducing ad load has happened in the US, where the ad load is vastly higher than it is in Europe. So it's probably quite appropriate because, you know, we talk about clutter. Clutter is all the other ads that appear around your own, distracting attention from it. And it is very clear that after a certain point, the increase in clutter produces a corresponding decline in value to the advertiser that mitigates, or it makes up for the increase in volume. So at some point, reducing loads is good for the broadcaster, it increases their overall revenues, it's good for the advertiser because it increases the attention that consumers will pay to their ads. And the advertiser will have to make the judgments as about whether that increase in attention is worth the extra price paid. In many cases, it will be.
Okay. Well, I guess that's a good point to move on to another point, really. Online video, particularly social media advertising. You know, we've seen in the last 12 months or so that there's a theme emerging where social media platforms are adopting longer form TV style advertising or ad formats. You know, inserting longer mid-rolls or pre-rolls into their copy, replacing static ads. And according to Facebook, who have implemented these longer form ads into Facebook Watch, their advertisers, particularly direct response advertisers, they say they're responding well to these formats. So, you know, what's your take on this? Why do you think Facebook claim this? You know, why do you think social media platforms claim that, you know, advertisers are responding well to, you know, these longer form ads in this age of, you know, ad blocking and the like?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm sure they're right. But I think at the moment, I don't think they published the figures, but this has got to be a tiny proportion of their advertising revenues at the moment. I mean, the huge growth we've seen in social media advertising over the last couple of years has all come from video, but it's generally been in-stream video. So video ads that appear within the news feed, which are very easy to scroll past. So that's led to a real change in the way that the advertisers view storytelling, because in order to get attention right at the first second, you have to present something that's shocking or has a very famous celebrity there, or something that really grabs attention in the very first second. Otherwise, you've lost the viewer. And in this case, you've lost them anyway because they've easily scrolled past what you were trying to present to them. So, I mean, this has been very successful for Facebook. It's helped really increase their revenues. But it doesn't lead to huge click-through rates or other response rates, certainly not compared to the type of awareness uptick you'd expect from television. So Facebook and other social media platforms naturally want to capture the attention of the viewer more and to keep it, which is why they've been investing more in long-form content, in television-like content, in sports and the like. And there has been very rapid growth in viewing. I'm not sure that the absolute levels of viewing are very high at the moment. But these sort of television-like environments are going to be much more effective at capturing viewers' attention and delivering awareness for advertisers. But I think it's just the scale of viewing at the moment is the problem that they'll be struggling with. Okay.
I guess we can't really talk about online video without mentioning mobile. and, you know, ad spend growth on mobile is dominating internet display, still on the rise. But what of the future? I mean, where do you see the potential opportunities lying for advertisers in the next few years? And also, despite its rapid growth, the rapid growth of mobile, I mean, what do you see are the weaknesses or the challenges that still exist in mobile advertising?
Well, I suppose the weakness of mobile advertising is that it's on a small device.
Yeah.
It's easy to ignore or flick away if you want to do something else. It's quite a low attention device, and I don't mean that people don't pay attention to it, but they will typically perform many actions on it in a single session. It's very easy to flick away and do anything else. However, I mean, there's still huge potential. If you go over to China, mobile viewing is enormous. It's something people will spend hours a day doing, and mobile video viewing of content which is created for the mobile is really challenging TV for mainstream peak time attention of young high spending audiences. So mobile content that's created for the mobile can be very successful. Now, China's an idiosyncratic market, but it also shows that they've made huge strides in commercializing their mobile video viewing. So, clicked purchase from a mobile video, going straight from a brand appearing as an ad or even during content, and then the consumer can just directly buy that off the platform. And then we've got product live streaming is becoming very, very big in China. So that's when a celebrity or someone who's known for their expertise in a particular area will show off particular brands to the audience and demonstrate what it can do, and then allow the audience to buy directly from that. That's got very popular and is generating large commerce revenues. So I think as well as paid media advertising, the mobile environment really has great potential for driving commerce revenues as well.
Okay, so we talked about mobile, and another huge driver of online growth is clearly paid search. And we know search ad spend still growing. We know the reasons for that. We know that paid search has become more integrated with retail and commerce, which has helped it grow, both on and offline. But what about the next step in the evolution of search? Voice search. You know, we've not yet seen direct advertising via voice search take off yet. But where do you see it going? I mean, and what have been the key barriers to entry for advertisers?
Well, I mean, there have been a few attempts to use voice search for advertising, and they've failed. They've caused outrage amongst consumers.
Yeah.
So the main barrier is consumer expectations. So voice search at the moment is not a paid advertising medium. It's very much an SEO medium. So in order to get at the top of the search results and therefore appear as a result on a voice search, you've got to really take care of your content, make sure that you identify the key keywords that your brand needs to own, and then invest heavily in making sure that you have the right content on the right websites to ensure that your brand is the best answer to that question, so that when someone makes a voice search on a home device, you are the one result, because they'll only get one result. Or if it's on a voice assistant on a phone, they'll only get a couple of results, so you need to be at the top.
Okay.
So you need to do great SEO is the answer at the moment.
So it's an investment in the technological infrastructure is key to its growth.
In technological infrastructure, in content, in online websites and the like.
Okay.
Now, I do expect voice search to become a paid medium at some point. It'd be interesting to see how that happens.
Yeah.
And at that point, I expect it to be a serious driver of revenue, because it will be a very natural way of connecting consumers who are looking for a particular item or service at that time with a brand that will be able to answer that need immediately.
Okay. I'm just aware of the time, so just finally, I'd just like to touch on out-of-home, really, and its compatibility with digital. I mentioned at the outset that digital is increasingly infiltrating or penetrating almost all media types. One of those is out-of-home, which continues to thrive globally. I mean, in the UK, we've recently seen Global Radio acquire 3 out-of-home companies recently, and they now possess around a third of the UK out-of-home sector. So why do you think there's still continued growth in the out-of-home sector? Well,
obviously, the big change in out-of-home in recent years has been the shift from paper to digital displays.
Yeah.
And that has driven enormous value for advertisers for several reasons. Principally because it's more eye-catching, but also allows timely response, so advertisers can change copy depending on recent events or the weather or whatever they want.
Yeah.
Digital is now the majority of out-of-home revenue, but still the minority of out-of-home inventory. So there will be further growth in converting analog to digital inventory, although that's expensive. The other big thing is the growing use of programmatic techniques, automated purchase techniques taken from the digital world, becoming more common for digital out-of-home, and is allowing better targeting, better attribution, and greater efficiency in buying. So programmatic techniques, and it's spread through out-of-home, which is starting to happen now.
So I guess what you're saying, the more compatible a medium is with digital, whether it be out-of-home or print or TV, if you like, the more likely it is to survive or even thrive.
Yep, that's exactly what I'd say.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today, Jonathan. I think that's all we've got. Yeah, that's all we've got time for. Thank you all for listening and attending this session. And I hope you enjoy the events over the next couple of days. Thank you.